And just like that, it is literally the end of the fight night of Song Yadong versus Gutierrez. And then obviously now we have Devin Haney as the 140-pound champion of boxing right now after releasing some of his belts that he had previously let go from the 135 division. Now, just an absolute great performance. It was an absolute shutout by Devin Haney. So what can you really say about it other than the fact that the guy is the next Floyd Mayweather? And now you have all these different storylines that are going on in UFC 296. But guess what? The only one that really is garnering any attention throughout that whole entire fight week is none other than Ian Gary. And by the way, I have a video coming out in just about a little bit regarding Ian Gary of why he doesn't really care about what you think and how that is going to be helpful to his process of becoming a world champion and his journey to now becoming possibly the double champion. All of a sudden, he has this heat with Leon Edwards, who's the current champion of the world right now. You can twist and turn that in any way that you want. Suppose both of these guys win their fights this next coming weekend. Guess what? They're going to be in each other's horizon. And then, how about the fact that let's say Colby Covington wins that fight against Leon Edwards, right? Ooh, what a real stacked division, because if he wins that particular fight and that belt, he may have to face Bilal Muhammad. At first, it was like, well, we want to see Leon Edwards run it back uh Bilal Muhammad because of that eye poke that they had in their first fight. But now you're in this situation where anything can happen with the mix and matches of all these different fights that are going on. Tonight, Song Yadong came out with a tough victory against Gutierrez. Now, Gutierrez was using a lot of front oblique kicks to pretty much keep him at bay, using the kicks almost as a jab, which I think is really phenomenal in terms of technical prowess. And it's not something that a lot of people use a lot, right? Which, with good reason, there were a few times where Song Yadong was able to take him down as a result of it, just catching his leg and then just taking him down to the ground, and obviously winning the fight through wrestling and some real aggressive strikes on his end. Now, how about with the co-main event with Khalil Roundtree versus Anthony Smith? Now, Anthony Smith is it just in this situation where it's like as if the guy just cannot catch a break for one reason or another, right? He had that situation with John Jones where he could have just stayed down and become a world champion due to disqualification. Yes, it would not have been the most pleasing way to win the title, in the same way that, well, a lot of people were giving flack for Aljamain Sterling in the way that he won the title against Peter Yan, only for him to come back in a few rematches and beat him down the road. Look, here's the thing, right? He could have done that same thing, right? He could have walked in the rematch against John Jones, because you know that if John Jones was going to lose by a disqualification again in the way that he did against Matt Hamill, guess what? They were going to run that back, and Anthony Smith would have probably made a whole lot more money, win or lose, and then he would have gone on to a different trajectory in his career. So here we are, a few fights later, and he gets knocked out by somebody that, well, none of us would have really expected him to knock him out in a couple of years ago, someone like Khalil Roundtree. Now, where does Khalil Roundtree go from here? Who knows, right? But he seems to be improving every second and every day. So don't be surprised if you end up seeing this guy somewhere in the top 5 in the next coming year or so. That's sort of just where he's at. Also, what else was in this card? So Haney versus the Progress fight. Now, how about the co-main event on that one? Liam Paro taking on Montana Love. Montana Love was the favorite to win this fight, and then Liam Paro from Australia ends up getting the nod out of nowhere and ends up getting the finish out of nowhere, right? Just an absolute barn burner of a fight. He dragged him into deep waters and somebody to look out for. 23-0 right now. Somebody fighting out of Australia. That's a country that needs somebody like Devin Haney to represent them. And guess what? Now he's in the same weight class as Devin Haney. So perhaps maybe a fight for Devin Haney sometime down the road. Ebony Bridges loses against this Japanese lady, Mayo Yoshida. And she was expected to win this fight. But obviously, it's great when you see these upsets in boxing. You sort of need more of this because sometimes you have boxing cards and a lot of times these people are just in there to win, and you know that they're going to win, and they're just there because, well, it's a mismatch. But nowadays, you're starting to see a lot more bigger matchups and 50-50 situations in boxing, and I'm glad that they're starting to implement that in the way that we've always seen out of the UFC. And then Andy Cruz, obviously, with his first pro knockout after just 2 fights in the pros. Took on tonight Giovanni Straffon, and yes, got the nod on that one right there. Got a finish on that one as well. So now let's take a look at all the cards that we have for UFC 296, right? Because that's literally what we're here for. That and Devin Haney. I'm going to go back and forth with the UFC that is happening this coming week. And also, I'm going to go back and forth with Devin Haney and explain to you why he is the new Floyd Mayweather. So we have Vicente Luque and Ian Gary opening the card, which is great, right? Because you go into the pay-per-view at 7 p.m. Western time. That song from STEM comes in. I don't know if they still do. I don't know if some broadcasts from around the world, depending on what kind of broadcast feed you get from the UFC, still plays that. But back in the old school days, STEM, the heavy metal band Face the Pain, was the staple music for UFC's entrance in their pay-per-view. So after you see that, guess what? Ian Gary is going to be the first guy that you're going to see up on the cards. Of course, you're going to see probably like the first 30 minutes of DC, Rogan, and Anik, and all the guys that are on the booth talking and breaking down the matchups that you're going to see in the main card and talking about all the exciting fights that they saw in the prelims leading up to the main card. And then you're going to have Vicente Luque taking on Ian Gary. Now, what's interesting about this fight is that Vicente Luque has a very underrated grappling, right? So we're really going to see Ian Gary's grappling being tested here. Now, we know that Vicente Luque is a type of fighter that's going to go for broke, but Ian Gary is a type of fighter that fights in a very, very crisp and technical manner, really uses his jab, really uses his length, uses all of his gifts in order for him to strike and outstrike his opponents, which is what he has been doing in the past couple of fights since he's been in the UFC. And I don't see that any different with Vicente Luque. Now, the only way that I could see this fight being contested truly is going to be on the grappling exchanges. And this is where we're going to see what level Ian Gary is at in terms of how much he's improved with his grappling. Because guess what? If you're a great striker as a prospect, sometime down the road, you're going to have to prove that you are a formidable grappler. And this is one of those fights that's going to do that, along with all the antics that has been going on with Ian Gary and all the things that, let's say, are coming into this situation with his wife and all these people that are going after her because of the quote unquote book that she wrote or this and that. I mean, look, here's the thing, right? I've noticed that there's 2 types of content creators in the MMA space, and you're really seeing that with Ian Gary. You're showing who or what type of MMA creators that are out there. There are those that are really going to play into this whole sensationalized matter of this story. And then there are those like myself who are a little bit of both of that. But then the other side of that is the technical aspect of the sport, what you can learn from these guys, what sort of skills they present, what sort of ceiling are they going to have in their career in terms of how far they're going to go, and what type of people they're going to be able to be matched up with, and what are some great matchups for them and what are some terrible matchups for them. So I'm a little bit of both in that, in terms of the classical journalism and the unconventional yellow journalism of everybody just stating their opinions and the sensationalized matter of the whole entire storyline. So again, all of these things are great. The fact that Ian Gary is a highly technical fighter, very promising, undefeated at that, on top of the storylines that are garnering attention for his fight, and he's the opener of the pay per view, you're not going to want to miss this one. So I'm going to give this one to Ian Gary by decision. I think that Vicente Luque is going to be very difficult to finish. Ian Gary is going to be tested in the deepest waters of this particular level that now he's reaching, and I think that he's going to be all right in this fight. I think that he's everything that we had promised him to be, but at the same time, he's just going to have a hard fight with the veteran Vicente Luque. So moving on from Vicente Luque and Ian Gary, we have Paddy Pimblett taking on Tony Ferguson, which, by the way, is another interesting fight in and of itself, right? Because as I've said over and over again in all the content that I've made regarding this particular fight over and over again, Paddy Pimblett is unproven in the world levels. Tony Ferguson is highly proven in this particular level. But now, by the end of it all, you really see Paddy as the favorite in this one. And I'm going to tell you why. For one, Paddy Pimblett is younger. He's a lot more explosive, but here's the problem. He's way less disciplined. And this is where the factor of Tony Ferguson and perhaps maybe his incoming genius is going to come into play, because everybody is slagging him off, talking bad about him, making fun of him because of this David Goggins situation. But what if he's on to something? And by the way, it's not that I don't agree with you guys, because I totally agree that bringing David Goggins into this training camp is going to do nothing but overtrain him. But the problem is, maybe there's something that we don't know that Tony Ferguson has in mind. Maybe he knows, and we all know this, Paddy Pimblett has a little bit of quit in him. The guy is very undisciplined in between his fight camps. So what do you expect him to come into this fight when, let's say, for one reason or another, Tony Ferguson drags him into deep waters? Now, is it possible for us to see Paddy Pimblett drive Tony Ferguson into deep waters? The answer is I'm not really sure, right? Because it will really depend on the explosivity of the first couple of minutes of the fight. Now, Paddy Pimblett can sometimes open up a fight really fast and furious out of nowhere. He'll open up with a flying knee. He'll come at you with some spinning attacks. He'll come at you with some real fast-paced movements of multiple punch combinations, and then try to shoot for a takedown. He can do that, but then at the same time, he can also be a slow starter, so you don't know what type of Paddy Pimblett you're going to get in this situation. But if you get an explosive Paddy where he starts off like that and then he connects his shots, I think that it's going to really set the tone for the entire fight towards his direction. Now, what if it's one of those situations where Tony actually gets off? Let's say he gets a few shots in. Let's say maybe he gets a head kick in or a jab in, or he's continuously connecting at Paddy because he keeps his hands down. And we all know how sloppy Paddy can be in that. Well, again, my prediction for this fight, this is going to be a decision as well. And I think it's going to be a very close one. It's going to look a lot like the Jared Gordon fight. Tony Ferguson is going to give a good account of himself. It's going to tell us everything that we've already been asking in this particular division, which is what? What have we been asking? Well, is it because that Tony has been losing? Could it be the reason and the culprit behind that? Because these are top guys that we're mentioning, Justin Gaethje, Michael Chandler, just to name a few. Okay? They're elite guys, but Paddy Pimblett is not. And I think we're going to see that when we see this fight go to a decision. And I'm going to give this to Paddy by close split decision on this one. Shavkat Rakhmonov against Stephen Wonderboy Thompson. I got to tell you, I think this is going to go into the cards as well. Why? Shavkat Rakhmonov is a fighter that is, well, an undefeated prospect, just like all these guys that you see right here, right? Shavkat Ian Gary, undefeated, but they are also top prospects for a reason. They are fresh, young, and hungry. And not only that, they are in the physical prime of their life. Whereas you look at here, Stephen Wonderboy Thompson is 40 years old, but is still very technically savvy, which means that you are going to see Wonderboy Thompson get rocked a few times in his fight. You might even see him get manhandled on the ground, but there's not going to be a finish in this fight. I'm going to give it to Shakhmat Rakhmonov by unanimous decision. So moving on, you have Alejandro Pantoja taking on Brandon Royval. I'm going to have to give this one to Andre Pantoja. I think that when he won his fight at UFC 290, I think he just has this sheer determination that led him to win that fight. But it's also that same sheer determination that I see him defending this title against Brandon Royval, based on the fact that when you become a champion, it just seems like you're a whole lot better. Now, Leon Edwards is also in that same trajectory. Before you saw the head kick by Leon Edwards against Kamaru Usman, what were some things that you had thought in your head? Right? You thought, well, you know what? This is how the fight's going to be. He's going to get out wrestled, and then that's going to be the end of it. And by the way, before that fight in Utah concluded, there were some people in the crowd that had left because they thought, okay, well, Kamaru Usman has this in the bag. Let's just go right now. We know what's going to happen. They missed out on the head kick. Leon Edwards, I think, is going to look really good in this fight against Colby Covington. But at the same time, I worry about the wrestling, but I also worry about how long Colby Covington can maintain that wrestling without getting head kicked in the same way that Usman did. Now, those are one of the things that you really have to look at. By the way, this fight right here is the hardest fight to predict in the whole entire card, and it just happens to be the main event. So obviously with Alexander Pantoja, I'm going to give him the decision on that one. With Leon Edwards and Colby Covington, that's a tough one to make. That's a tough prediction to make right there. Really tough. Because, again, Leon Edwards can knock you out at any moment of time. It's literally like a Deontay Wilder eraser, right? Meaning that if you're continuously making mistakes all throughout the fight, out of nowhere, guess what? You can easily have a game changer and eraser to all your mistakes, i.e. head kick, i.e. the knockout power that Deontay Wilder has going on. By the way, how about Deontay Wilder and that little situation he has where Francis Ngannou and him are possibly going to fight in a mixed rules bout? But why do that when you can just do MMA or just boxing in and of itself? But that's a different story for a different podcast episode nonetheless. I'm going to have to go with Leon Edwards on this one for those same reasons that I had mentioned about Brandon Royval, and the same reasons that I had mentioned also about the fact that when you're a champion, it just seems like your game is one up more than the next, only because of momentum. Now, I've heard this type of talk when Frankie Edgar became champion. By the way, when he beat BJ Penn and he came back, got that win against, I'm sorry. He got a draw against Gray Maynard. He lost to him the first time, and then the third time he finally beat him. But nonetheless, again, momentum. When you're the champion, there's a certain momentum that you have going on. Leon Edwards' wrestling has vastly improved. Now, has it improved to the point where he's going to be the more dominant wrestler in this fight? No. But you don't need to be the most dominant wrestler in this fight. You just need to be the better fighter. And I just think that if you want me to make a decision on the spot right now, I'm going to give this to Leon Edwards. Surprisingly, somewhere down the line, he's going to get a head kick knockout or a finish or maybe a body kick KO, TKO at some point of this fight. Colby Covington has been out for a few years. I mean, yeah, it just hasn't really been active. Sure, he fought last year, but a year before that, he was just fighting older guys and this and that. Again, that doesn't really say much, right? But again, this is why this fight is hard to predict, because of these factors that I had just mentioned. The momentum of Leon Edwards and his championship prowess that he's going to take into this fight. adding on to the new skills that he has going on. Add that to the fact that Colby Covington is a vet who has some miles in his clock. But I mean, not really, right? If you think about it, Leon Edwards has more fights than Colby Covington, but who took more damage in their career? And I think Colby Covington is the name that we can really spew off of that one, right? I mean, he's been knocked out by Usman. He's also been knocked out in the streets by Jorge Masvidal. And by the way, make of that as you will. I know that he says, like, yeah, it was life-altering experience for him. It had changed him for the negative or this and that. Make of that as you will. The thing that you have to understand with Colby Covington is that he's damaged goods either way going into this fight, whether he's bluffing about the Jorge Masvidal steakhouse incident or not. Those other fights and those other matchups that you've seen him in and those other wars with Usman, they're going to add up. And, well, again, the susceptibility of getting knocked out isn't too far in this particular fight. So let's take a look at the prelims that they have going on here. Alonzo Menfield versus Dustin Jacoby. Dustin Jacoby is a veteran kickboxing champion, or a veteran kickboxer at that. I'm going to have to go with Dustin on this one by a decision. Tagir Olbanov taking on Cody Durden. I'm going to have to go with Tagir on that one by decision. How about this? Sacramento's own Andre Fili taking on Lucas Almeida. To be honest with you, I'm going to be very biased on that one. I'm taking Andre Fili. I think Andre Fili is a veteran. He's had a lot of experience now fighting in the UFC. And although it's one of those situations where you have this new guy coming up with a fresh new record, only 2 losses, you got to think to yourself, right? Sometimes experience, especially within the UFC, and not just experience anywhere else, really plays a factor into these matchups. Great striking, always improving in his grappling, and I can see Andre Fili get a finish in this one. Maybe even a second round TKO. Martin Bidet taking on Shamil Gaziev, 11-0. I'm going to have to go with Shamil on this one. He's undefeated. He knows how to win, but you never know with Martin Bidet. How about this for an opener, right? Randy Brown taking on Muslim Salikov. Now, Randy Brown sometimes has a problem with being able to use his length and his size, right? And in terms of maintaining it, meaning that he can stick the jab at you for 1 or 2 rounds, and then out of nowhere, you've seen in the Jack Della Maddalena fight, sometimes you close a distance on him and bad things happen. I could see Muslim Salikov not only closing the distance at him, but also hitting him with some spinning back kicks along the way, probably even finishing him in this fight. First round. That's how I'm going to go with that one. Josh Emmett taking on Bryce Mitchell. How about this? Bryce Mitchell stepping in for just a short notice. I'm going to have to go with Josh Emmett on this one. We've all seen what happens with short notice fights. We don't know what type of shape Bryce Mitchell is in. Josh Emmett can push a really fast pace, and if anything, don't be surprised if Josh Emmett out wrestles him and probably gets a decision in this one. Irene Aldana taking on Carol Rosa. I'm going to go with Irene Aldana. Same thing. Decision on that one. Cody Garbrandt versus Brian Kelleher. I could actually see Cody Garbrandt get a 3rd round finish in this one. He's going to cook him up a little bit. You've seen that video where they mentioned something to the effect of, well, yeah, for 25 minutes, Cody was the greatest fighter of all time, or was the greatest fighter in this particular weight class against Dominic Cruz. I could see him implement that against Brian Kelleher. Now, Brian Kelleher is a tough vet. You've seen he's been in a lot of fights. He's got a great chin, but I think somewhere down the line, Cody Garbrandt is going to outwork him, outpace him, and finish him off with a TKO in the later rounds, maybe even in the 3rd. Casey O'Neill taking on Ariane Lipsky. I got Casey O'Neill on that one. And that is basically the prediction that I have for all of UFC 296. And by the way, this isn't the first time that I've been doing predictions for this particular card, right? I've been doing predictions for this card for the past couple of months now, right? So let's take a look at some videos of mine. I'm sorry, you can take a look at some videos of mine about this particular subject and this particular fight and tell me how it differs from now till then. And yeah, we'll see if I made any changes from then. But for now, that's literally my official prediction for the entire fight card of UFC 296 this coming weekend. So how about the performance with Devin Haney tonight, right? Now, how about the fact that he, I believe, was stripped from his 135 championship, or how did that go? Or was it one of the belts? But either way, when you become undisputed champion, I think at some point, okay, maybe you want to defend it as the undisputed champion, but then some guys just don't really care. You already have the accolades that comes with it. There's nothing that really that you can do really more of that. I mean, all these sanctioning bodies, not only did they charge you to be their champion, right? So you have to pay a fee while they're your champion, but they're also giving you mandatories at which sometimes these fights either don't make any sense or fights that won't get you any money at all. And by the way, speaking of fights that won't get you any money, how about Jake Paul this weekend, this coming Friday, the day before UFC 296 and the day before Edwards takes on Rodriguez in the, I believe, 112-pound championship unification bout out in Phoenix. So how about that? Two Edwards that are from England are going to be fighting in the southwest of the United States in two different locations on the same day. And we'll see how that goes, right? Edwards, Sonny Edwards versus Rodriguez on the boxing side, and then Leon Edwards versus Colby Covington on the MMA side. So that's going to be interesting how the two Edwards are going to fare in their upcoming matchup in the southwest of the United States. Edwards and Rodriguez are going to be fighting in Phoenix, Arizona, and obviously, traditionally, where most title fights take place, Leon Edwards and Colby Covington are going to be fighting in Las Vegas. So that's going to be an interesting fight. That's going to be an interesting card, and I'm really interested to see what career trajectory Devin Haney takes from here on. Now, is he going to move on to 147? Is he too small for that particular weight class? Well, that was one of the questions that they asked uh during the broadcast. And this is where the comparison with Floyd Mayweather comes in, right? When Floyd was very young, you have to remember he fought as low as maybe 130, maybe 135 at the very least. And obviously he fought as high as 154, and he never even weighed as far as 154. If he tried to weigh in on those bouts, he would weigh in like 152 or this and that, and that's the most that he would weigh. So you see that Devin Haney is sort of taking those same steps already. He has like over 30 wins in his bout now, right? He's 25 years old. Don't be surprised if he's able to beat Floyd's record. If not, Terrence Crawford is able to beat that record. But either way, right? You just see nothing but positive, uh, positive future, a positive light for Devin Haney. But I don't think he's gonna make 147 sometime soon, right? Maybe in his 30s. Right now, he's 25 years old, right? So in the weight classes of 135, 140, the super lightweight divisions. I think this is great for him right now. And you've seen how he performed against Regis tonight. I don't see him doing anything different than, let's say, against Josh Taylor. Certainly against O'Hara Davis, that would be easy work. Who else is a top 140 guy right now? Lomachenko, he already beat. He's not a 140. There's not a whole lot of big names at 140, right? And obviously, he wants to work his way up to 147. But for now, he can work his way up to winning some titles at 140, maybe even become undisputed at 140. And then sometime down the road, take on Josh Taylor, who at one point was the undisputed champion, who by the way never lost it, only lost it through the sanctioning bodies. But that in and of itself is a different conversation for a different topic and a different content as to why these belts in boxing matter or they don't matter, and at what point do they not matter when they start stripping you for it. But that's literally all that I have for tonight's coverage of UFC Fight Night, December 9th, 2023. This is the beginning coverage of UFC 296 and the predictions for this fight that's coming up, all the fights that are in this card, and talking about the career trajectory of Devin Haney and where he's going to go from here on out, what his career is going to look like sometime down the road. By the way, guys, don't forget to like and subscribe, and don't forget to tell a friend so we can make this channel one of the biggest combat sports channels there are out there in YouTube. And by the way, not just covering MMA, not just covering boxing, but also covering world events. We can even go into hip hop. You want to talk about all the stories that are going on in the world of, let's say, P. Diddy and the Tupac Shakur case. I can add all those things into this particular content, even though this is a niche MMA content. It doesn't have to be. We can go off the tangents off of different subjects just to get your dopamine high going when you listen to these particular podcasts and content that I present to you on a daily, on a weekly, on a monthly, on a yearly, and a forever concept that I'm going to bring to the combat sports world, inshallah. Don't forget to like and subscribe.